In the small town of Eldridge, where the air was thick with gossip and secrets, 19-year-old Lucas had always been a dreamer. With tousled brown hair and deep-set green eyes, he had an air of vulnerability about him that belied a restless spirit within. While his peers were busy navigating the trivialities of high school romance, Lucas found himself captivated by something far more complex, a love that transcended age, societal norms, and eventually, reason itself. It was at the local coffee shop, a quaint establishment where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of old books, that Lucas first laid eyes on Margaret. At 51, she was a striking figure with cascades of silver hair and an enigmatic gaze that seemed to hold the weight of untold stories. She was a widow, having lost her husband a few years prior, and spent much of her time in the cafe scribbling notes in a leather-bound journal, an apparent writer. Margaret noticed Lucas sitting alone, his eyes wandering through the pages of a novel. She struck up a conversation, complimenting his taste in literature. Their initial talk was innocent enough, punctuated by laughter and shared glances that lingered a heartbeat too long. Lucas felt an inexplicable pull towards her, something wild and fervent that he neither understood nor could control. Days turned into weeks, and as their meetings became habitual, the bond between Lucas and Margaret deepened. They shared coffee, confessions, and dreams under the watchful eyes of the cafe patrons who began to murmur. Lucas was enchanted by Margaret's wisdom and experience, while she found in him a refreshing spirit that reignited her passion for life. Their unlikely friendship flourished in the shadows of societal judgment. Lucas was enthralled. He felt seen and valued in ways he'd never experienced before. As spring faded into summer, their friendship grew into a romance, cloaked in secrecy. They met clandestinely, savoring stolen moments filled with fervent conversations and fleeting kisses that ignited the fire of passion they both had long thought extinguished. However, as heady as their love was, it was also fraught with complications. Margaret, torn by her feelings, began to question the morality of their relationship. She was aware of the scandal they represented, the whispers it would create in a town where reputation was everything. At times, she would push Lucas away, insisting they could never truly be together because of their age difference and her previous commitments that weighed heavily on her heart. Lucas, on the other hand, was oblivious to these concerns, fueled by an idealistic view of love. In his mind, true love could conquer any obstacle. Yet as the summer drew to a close, he felt the first pangs of desperation as Margaret's fence-sitting began to chip away at the blissful cocoon they had created. As autumn leaves fell and the cold air set in, Lucas's heart became a battlefield. The more Margaret hesitated, the more hopelessly he fell for her. He spent sleepless nights consumed by thoughts of their future together, numbing his despair with reckless behaviors, drinking too much, skipping classes, and indulging in risky dares with friends. His friends, oblivious to the depth of his feelings, noticed something was off. "Dude, what's going on with you?" they'd ask, their concern mostly brushed off by Lucas, who would merely smile and change the topic. The pressure of unrequited love began to twist itself into something dark within him. One chilling evening, after a particularly intense conversation during which Margaret reaffirmed her reservations, Lucas found himself spiraling into a pit of despair. He paced his small room, mumbling to himself about how he would do anything for her love. The thought of losing her sent him into a turmoil, and he felt betrayed by what he believed was her indecision. In the days that followed, Lucas's obsession took a sinister turn. He began to fantasize about proving his love. He convinced himself that if Margaret would not embrace their future, she must be made to understand the depth of his feelings, whatever the cost. One fateful night, emboldened by a mixture of fury and heartache, Lucas confronted Margaret at her home. As the darkness enveloped the town, Lucas's emotions crescendoed into a violent storm when he heard her voice, gentle yet resolute, explaining why they could never be together. "Lucas, you have your whole life ahead of you. This isn't real," she pleaded, tears glistening in her eyes. The words struck him like daggers, twisting deeper into his soul. In a moment of pure despair, Lucas grabbed a kitchen knife, his mind clouded by a whirlwind of emotions, a cocktail of love, rage, and profound hurt. In that deeply tragic instant, the boundaries of sanity blurred. Moments later, he had crossed the threshold from heartbreak to horror. When the sirens wailing in the distance finally broke through the fog of his actions, Lucas was left sitting amid the chaos, the weight of what he had done crashing over him like a tidal wave. The blood staining the floor was not merely Margaret's, it was the remnants of his shattered dreams and youthful innocence. The trial surrounding Margaret's death captivated the small town. Lucas, once a beloved rising star, became a specter, a cautionary tale of love gone too far. The courtroom echoed with the gasps and whispers of the townsfolk who had once gossiped about their love in the warmth of the cafe. Now, they grappled with the grim reality of its end. During the proceedings, Lucas sat in silence, reflecting on the sweet moments they had shared intermingled with the haunting regret of that tragic night. He spoke little, but his defense emphasized the themes of mental anguish and obsession, painting him as a lost soul who couldn't process his emotions. Yet, the jury was less swayed by the tragic romance than by the brutality of his actions. The verdict came down heavy. The court found him guilty of second-degree murder. As he was led away, the weight of the world pressed upon him. In a strange twist, he realized that in losing the woman he loved, he had irrevocably lost himself. Years passed, and the town of Eldridge tried to heal, though whispers of the romance lingered like a ghostly presence. Lucas, now a man in prison, spent his days reflecting on the choices that had led him to this point. The fleeting happiness he had chased had transformed into an eternal shadow that would follow him wherever he went. Margaret remained forever young in his memories, a vibrant essence of life and love, forever tainted by the darkness of jealousy and obsession. Lucas learned, too late, that love, when entwined with possession, can often lead to tragedy, and in his quest for an impossible union, he had destroyed the very thing he sought. In the quiet of his cell, he often penned letters to Margaret, not knowing if they would ever reach the heavens. "I'm sorry," he wrote, time and again, as he grappled with the ghosts of what could have been. These letters, reflections of a love forever lost, served as a reminder that some stories, despite their beauty, are doomed to end in heartbreak.
In a small town nestled between rolling hills, where everyone knew each other's name, a peculiar relationship blossomed in the shadows. Mark Thompson, a 19-year-old with big dreams and a naive heart, found himself involved with Margaret Wilkins, a 50-year-old divorcee who had a reputation for her vivacious spirit. While the townsfolk whispered about their unconventional pairing, the two seemed to thrive in their secretive bubble, exchanging stolen moments at local cafes and parks. It all began one autumn day when Mark, an aspiring artist, visited a local art exhibit. Margaret, an art enthusiast, was captivated by his youthful vision and creativity. Their conversations quickly turned into romantic outings, and what started as an innocent friendship blossomed into an intense relationship. For Mark, Margaret represented a world beyond his own, a mentor, a friend, a lover, all wrapped into one. Yet, for Margaret, Mark was a return to her youth, a chance to feel alive again. As their relationship progressed, the age gap began to weigh heavily on both. Mark found himself in a whirlwind of emotions, oscillating between affection and insecurity. His friends and family were baffled, often questioning his choices and warning him about the potential emotional fallout. Margaret, too, faced scrutiny from her peers, who viewed her relationship with the young artist as inappropriate. They struggled under the pressure of societal judgment, but the emotional bond they had built kept them together. However, cracks began to show. Mark wanted more than what was being offered. He dreamed of a future filled with love, stability, and a family. Margaret, still haunted by her past and wary of commitment, was reluctant to take their bond to that next level. The more Mark expressed his feelings and desires, the more Margaret pulled away, igniting a conflict that spiraled out of control. As fall turned to winter, things worsened. Mark's frustration and despair grew, feeding a dark obsession. He began to believe that if he couldn't have Margaret completely, he could at least eliminate the pain of heartache. One evening, after a particularly heated argument where Margaret dismissed his feelings yet again, Mark left her apartment feeling desolate. Alone in his room, he contemplated his next move, wrestling with his turbulent emotions. He stumbled upon an online forum discussing toxic relationships and various extremes of love. The dangerous rhetoric began to seep into his mind. One post suggested that sometimes extreme actions were necessary to rid oneself of pain. A chilling thought crept into Mark's consciousness. What if he could free himself from the agony of rejection? In a fit of rage and desperation, Mark returned to Margaret's apartment that fateful night. He intended to confront her one last time, to perhaps make her see the depths of his devotion. But the conversation quickly shifted from passionate pleas to bitter accusations. With each word, Mark felt his heart fracture further, and in a moment of sheer madness, he could no longer contain his emotions. In a reckless act of violence, he took a knife from her kitchen and, in a blur of anger and heartbreak, he stabbed her. The reality of what he had done crashed down on him like a tidal wave. Margaret lay there, lifeless, and Mark fled the scene, his mind racing, his heartbeat drumming a frantic rhythm of regret and horror. The news of Margaret's death shook the community. Friends and family were devastated, piecing together the tragic narrative of an unconventional love story turned cold-blooded murder. The town was engulfed in a sense of disbelief. How could love twist into such monstrosity? Meanwhile, Mark had gone into hiding. His mind swirled with guilt and confusion, but he knew he could not escape the consequences. Several days later, feeling the weight of his actions suffocating him, he turned himself in. In an emotional confession, he described their relationship, his feelings of betrayal, and how love, twisted by age and circumstance, had led to an irreversible tragedy. The trial captivated the nation, a case that delved deep into the complexities of love, age, obsession, and mental health. Experts debated whether Mark's actions were premeditated or a tragic consequence of his emotional turmoil. The defense argued he was a troubled young man overcome with heartache, while the prosecution painted him as a cold murderer who couldn't cope with rejection. As the trial unfolded, Mark's story ignited conversations about mental health awareness, the dynamics of relationships across generations, and the often unseen battles that rage within those caught in tumultuous love. Ultimately, Mark was sentenced to years in prison, a life irrevocably altered by a moment of rage and heartbreak. Years later, as he reflected on his life in prison, Mark understood the irrevocable damage caused by mismanaged emotions and undiscussed mental health issues. In his art, he began to channel the pain of his past, hoping to use his experiences as a cautionary tale, a reminder to others navigating the intricate web of love, obsession, and emotional fallout. The tragic story of Mark and Margaret serves as a haunting reminder that the lines between love and obsession can often blur, leading to devastating consequences that echo far beyond the lives of those directly involved. Jessica was a bright and ambitious young woman in her early 20s, studying psychology at a prestigious university. With her charming smile and meticulous nature, she was often the center of attention. Despite her vibrant personality, there was an ominous shadow lurking beneath her exterior, a need for control that stemmed from her turbulent childhood. Growing up in a dysfunctional household where chaos reigned, Jessica developed an intense desire to shape her surroundings, particularly in her relationships. In her sophomore year, she met Alex. He was everything she had ever wanted: kind, charming, and devoted. The two quickly fell in love, and their relationship blossomed. However, as the initial euphoria of love faded, Jessica's darker side began to surface. The insecurity from her past reared its ugly head, and she realized she needed to take charge of the relationship to feel secure in her emotions. At first, her control was gentle and subtle. Jessica would suggest certain outfits she liked for Alex to wear when they went out, and he obligingly complied, wanting to keep her happy. She started monitoring his social media, urging him to limit his interactions with female friends. "It's not that I don't trust you, babe. It's just that I want to protect our relationship," she'd say, masking her possessiveness under the guise of love. As time went on, Jessica's desires morphed into obsessive behavior. She would call him multiple times a day, demanding to know where he was and who he was with. Alex, initially charmed by her attentiveness, began to feel stifled. Friends started to notice the change in him. He was more withdrawn and less vibrant, yet he dismissed their concerns. "She just loves me a lot," he'd explain. But deep down, he struggled with the suffocating nature of Jessica's love. As the months passed, Jessica's anxiety grew, festering into an uncontrollable need to dominate every aspect of Alex's life. She started isolating him from his friends and family, convincing him that they didn't truly care about him. "They just want to pull you away from me," she would argue, eyes flickering with determination. Alex, still deeply in love, complied, but the strain of the relationship grew heavier. One fateful night, Jessica discovered a message from an old friend of Alex's, someone she deemed a threat. Consumed with rage, she confronted him. Their argument escalated quickly, revealing the depths of Jessica's control. "You're mine, Alex. You can't just talk to anyone you want," she yelled, her voice raw with emotion. "I love you, Jess, but you can't dictate my life," Alex retorted, finally pushing back against her overreach. That night was the beginning of the end. The love they once shared warped into a battle for dominance. Jessica's fear of losing control hardened her heart. Desperation clawed at Jessica as the realization that she was losing Alex hit her. She began to devise a plan that would ensure his undying loyalty. She obsessed over the idea of eliminating anyone she saw as a threat to their relationship. The paranoia saturated her thoughts. If Alex couldn't talk to anyone else, he would have no choice but to rely solely on her. One evening, Jessica drove herself to an unsettling conclusion. She'd overheard Alex discussing the possibility of breaking up with her with a mutual friend at a party. In a frenzied state, she plotted to eliminate the perceived threat once and for all. She decided that if she couldn't control Alex's mind, she would have to take more drastic measures. On a chilling Friday night, Jessica invited Alex over for what she claimed was a make-or-break dinner. As they sat down, she poured wine, a little too freely, enhancing the atmosphere with romantic music to disguise her intentions. Their conversations ebbed and flowed, weaving between laughter and tension. However, the entire time Jessica was plotting. She had prepared a cocktail laced with poison, an untraceable concoction she had researched late into the night. As the evening went on, Jessica coaxed Alex into relaxing, ensuring he drank deeply from the glass she had prepared for him. "What's wrong, darling? You look a little pale," she feigned concern, her heart racing with anticipation. "Just tired, Jess," he replied, wincing as he took another sip. As the poison coursed through his veins, Alex began to feel disoriented. Jessica watched with a twisted sense of satisfaction, her heart pounding as she perceived the fruition of her plan. Within minutes, Alex's condition rapidly deteriorated. He struggled to stand, his vision blurred. Jessica feigned panic, calling 911 under the guise of being the concerned girlfriend. "Please, my boyfriend is unresponsive," she screamed into the phone, her voice echoing a facade of distress. But in her heart, she felt victorious. She had thwarted any chance of losing him. As the sirens wailed closer, she paced the floor, a mix of adrenaline and dread coursing through her veins. When the paramedics arrived, it was too late. Alex was pronounced dead at the scene, the mysterious circumstances puzzling the medical team. The police launched an investigation, interviewing Jessica and reviewing the circumstances surrounding Alex's death. Her initial tears of grief were meticulously calculated, her alibi unwavering. However, detectives began to notice inconsistencies in her story. Witnesses from the party where Alex had confided exposed the tension in their relationship, and details about her possessiveness began to surface. After a few days of investigation, toxicology reports came back, revealing lethal substances in Alex's system. With mounting evidence, Jessica was finally arrested. The courtroom was filled with emotion as the trial began. Jessica, once the center of attention as a charming and articulate young woman, now sat in a defendant's chair, her carefully constructed facade starting to crumble. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of obsession and control, portraying her as a master manipulator who had orchestrated Alex's demise out of fear and jealousy. Witness after witness recounted the toxic nature of Jessica's affection, detailing her controlling behavior. The evidence was overwhelming, and her defense struggled to counter the prosecution's narrative. In a moment of melancholy, Jessica took the stand, attempting to defend her actions. "I loved him too much," she explained, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared of losing him. He meant everything to me. I never wanted this to happen." But the jury saw through her pleas. After several weeks, the jury deliberated. The atmosphere in the courtroom was thick with tension as they returned with their verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. Jessica was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. As she sat in her cell, the reality of her actions began to settle in. The walls that confined her became a reflection of her own mind, isolated and filled with regret. She had achieved the control she so desperately sought, yet it came at the highest cost. Echoes of laughter and love haunted her, intertwining with memories of Alex. The truth cut through the darkness. She had lost him forever, not only due to her insatiable need for control, but through the very act of trying to possess him. In the dust of her choices, Jessica learned that love, if twisted by the need for control, could lead to devastating consequences. The shadows of her ambition would forever loom over her, reminding her of the fragility of life and love. The tragic story of Jessica and Alex serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of obsession, manipulation, and the dire consequences when love turns into a deadly desire for control. As the sun sets beyond the prison walls, a new day dawns, providing hope for redemption and a chance for reflection on the true meaning of love and freedom.